Hey, hi, and welcome. Hi. First of all, there's a lot of cables in between. Um, Thank you guys for agreeing to do this with me. For all the listeners, welcome to another episode of Dance to the Music podcast, which, by the way, besides Spotify and Apple Podcasts, you can now catch the videos on YouTube. And on that note, you can also subscribe to the channel. Um, First question is how you feeling? Because actually, I mean, at least for me, a little early during the day. So, how you guys feeling?
I'm feeling good. I'm feeling good. Definitely feel like I'm at the beginning stages of maybe getting a cold.
Oh
So I think
no.
after this, I'm gonna try to take it easy. But overall, I'm feeling good. I'm usually a pretty like I wake up early, um, naturally all the time. So
Huh.
this is fine for me.
Early riser.
Yeah.
Totally. I feel like I'm at the end stages of getting a cold, so I'm like finally getting over it. So definitely feeling better, you know.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Well, first of all, now it just popped into my head because you told me you had a cold. Um, that was a dope set on Sunday,
Oh,
by the
thank you.
way.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
Just
you.
had to put
Thanks.
that in there. First time I just have to go back. First
Mm.
time I saw you guys was at Le Bain, I think in 2018 or
Mm.
2019,
Oh
Okay.
yeah.
and I'm trying to figure this out.
Yeah. That sounds good.
That
Yeah.
sounds better. Yeah.
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 Um, and at Le Bain, and since then, obviously, pandemic. I
Mm.
don't know,
Yeah.
and keep seeing you guys. And now it's like every time I mention or somebody mentions the name Muscle Cars, it's like, oh, Muscle Cars are great. They had the New York sound.
That's so
Everybody's
funny.
enthusiastic of hearing your name, to say the least.
Mhm.
Now, first, I also have to say, if you haven't, at least I couldn't find any info on that. How did you guys came up with the name Muscle Cars, and how does it relate to your like duo or like partnership as a DJ? Group is more than two. I don't know. A group, DJ group.
Duo.
DJ group.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, whatever you want to call it. I feel like Brandon is the muscle and I'm the cars is the joke that we usually give people, but I think it was like an inside joke when we were teenagers
Mm.
with like some friends. Um, I don't. Do you remember where it came from? It
I
was
think
like
it was
something from like.
from some music video.
Yeah, yeah,
And I think at the time we were DJing as just Brandon Weems and Craig Handfield, like on flyers
Sounds
before that.
familiar.
And
Okay.
so wanted like we feel like we needed a name
Mm-hmm.
for this like partnership. And yeah, I think settled on that because we had friends that like were joking about it and we're just like, oh, it's kind of like humorous, it's silly. And I think at the time too, it didn't really like it's not a name that you look at and you kind of maybe have an idea of the kind of music that you're gonna hear or what to
Mm-hmm.
expect. So I think uh, it kind of allowed that as well.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
Just like this, no expectations about like the kind of music
Oh, that's cool.
that we play just from the name alone.
Oh, that's dope. Yeah. And also, I have to ask because the question that recently, actually, in Amsterdam, somebody asked me, like, muscle cars, you think they got the name? And I don't know what their theory was. I already forgot, but it was not
Mm.
that,
Yeah.
obviously.
Yeah.
For Europeans who, like, don't like muscle cars is a certain term, and or if you're not into cars, like, I had no
Hmm.
idea. When I Googled you, I was like, what? Oh, I guess cars, yeah.
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 So thank you for explaining that to me.
Yeah.
And then just speaking about the enthusiasm about your name or just like seeing you guys or like hearing you play, how does, after so many years now that you guys play together, how does that feel for you guys to be considered the sound, the keeping the tradition, the New York sound and tradition alive? That's a word that people use, you know. Is Do you guys, you feel honored? Do you feel a certain type of pressure that comes with it? How do you guys see that? Maybe individually also or as a group?
Yeah. Do you wanna?
Yeah. Yeah. It's kind of crazy. To be honest. Definitely feel flattered. For sure, a bit of pressure as well. Um, but at the same time, I feel like while we are keeping that sound alive, we also do our own thing in terms of the music that we play.
Hmm.
It definitely is rooted in New York City dance music, but also we like to pull from other other genres sometimes and other things as well. But yeah, kind of Definitely, yeah, kind of crazy. And I always try to take myself back to being 16 years old and like wanting to play at Lebain, for example. Like we used to sneak into the club a lot as teenagers
Yeah.
before we were 21 at like 18, 19. So yeah, even to play the places that we're getting to play now, like nowadays, for example. Like we just played with Marcellus this past Sunday, the party you were at. And
Yeah.
yeah, I've been going to nowadays to see Marcellus every year because he plays on Thanksgiving Eve for his birthday. And yeah, I was just going as just a fan, so it was kind of crazy to like play with him now. So yeah, I think just taking it all in still, even though it's been a few years. And yeah, just like very, very grateful. I think comes back to gratitude for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that it's just super grateful, super flattered, always surprised, like no matter what we're doing. And I know it probably comes as a shock because we're kind of so devoted. Like everything we do is just like with the intention of like putting it back into our music, our party, our community, et cetera, et cetera. But then to hear how it affects people for some reason is just like always shocking. It never like gets old. So
Yeah, that's good. Do you see a difference in the reactions based on the locations, like New York or like the States compared to when you guys play in Europe? Because you've been playing in Europe now more frequently. Now, what I've noticed,
Yeah.
is there like a difference of maybe just your feeling of what kind of expectations people have of hearing you play?
yeah, I think that I mean we're from here, New York, and I know a thing about like New Yorkers or just people here in general is that they're not uh, they don't want to be too excited or too eager, like um, if somebody like wants to give you props in New York, they'll be like, "Oh yeah, that was cool. Like that was a cool set." Yeah. But yeah, you go overseas, like in Europe or oh yeah, is this
No, you're good. You're good. I just
Okay.
wanted to make sure the camera
copy? So you go to certain cities in Europe, and they'll like freak out. Even like in Asia, we were at like I remember we were in like Malaysia actually. Some guy was like freaking out, like super geeked about the music and knew everything about just like our production process and how we have these different like arrangements and like phrases in our songs. And you kind of forget how excited people are, like how much people are paying attention, because in New York we're just kind of like so blasé and so like nonchalant about it. Yeah, I don't. Do you feel like it's kind of a similar thing, like the U.S. versus like overseas?
That's very different. The engagement is different, at least from a party perspective. The way people engage with the music in New York is just very, very different compared to like places like Germany or even Amsterdam. I'm sure you saw out there too. Like, uh, and also I think the demographics in New York is just so culturally diverse. So you have people from all different types of backgrounds, but also age demographics too. That's what I love about playing in New York is that you get people that are in their 60s and 50s, but also people in their 20s and 30s. So you have this like intergenerational. You have like the old, you know, house dancers teaching the younger generation like dance floor etiquette and things like the older crowd. They're very vocal, so they like to yell at the DJ. They like to make sounds and things like that.
Right.
And I think it's just something from our experience is just so specific to New York. I think the only place I saw that a bit was at June in Paris. When we played Greg's party on Sunday. There's like a huge house dancing community over there. But yeah, it's very different for sure.
It's interesting that you say this. Definitely in New York, intergenerational, multicultural crowd. Um, for however, some places, and is tying into one of my next questions that I have. Some parties or some venues are not very diverse. And it's very young crowd,
Yeah.
younger than you guys. I don't know your specific age, but
Mm-hmm.
you guys are younger than me.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, that kind of crowd is even really young, like
Yeah.
early
Yeah.
20s, you know, just like, especially after the pandemic. I feel like everybody who turned 21 in the pandemic, they just
Crazy.
came out like,
Right.
you know, from a 0 to 100.
Yeah.
My question is, and I think I read that in an interview that you guys did. I think it was you, Craig, that said, as far as in relation to gentrification, how people who I can quote you if I find my sentence. I'll
Yeah.
repeat the
Yeah.
page, but it's if I'm paraphrasing, it's like people who are actually are not able to navigate the hood or live in a hood. They also have troubles navigating a nightlife space or can't really don't know how to behave in a nightlife space. Let's put it that way. And number one, you guys are both from New York, both from Brooklyn, I think, also.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, how has just the optics obviously changed from when you just started? You just said you wanted to sneak into La Band, you wanted to play when you were 16. How has, in La Band itself is like, it's a diverse crowd in the sense you get a hotel crowd, you get a
Right.
meatpacking district
Yeah.
crowd, but it's
Yeah.
still always like a mixed bunch of people that
Yeah.
come,
Yeah.
you know.
Right.
How has that changed for you guys since you started DJing until like now? And then you've also seen the international crowd. Like, how do you guys feel about the New York, it's a broad term, the New York dance floor in general, with the good, the bad, and anything in between, basically?
Yeah. Um, to be honest, it's from a DJ's perspective at least, and even like on the other side on the dance floor, it's one of my favorite dance floors in the world. And I try not to be biased because I'm from New York. I think when I was younger, I would always look to Europe as like, oh, like that's where I want to go play, and it's great. And I think there are great things in Europe, but for the music that I love, this is where it was born and bred, and there's a lot of like culture here. Yeah, in terms of the bad, I mean, you sometimes will always get people that act up, and that kind of thing. But at least the clubs that we go to, I feel like there's definitely an emphasis on like safe space, like places like nowadays where they have like the safe space monitors, and also the crowd that goes to those kind of venues and parties, just have more of a mindfulness of maybe checking in on each other and calling out any bad behavior, which I feel like you get a bit of that overseas as well, but I maybe don't see signs in clubs about like safe spaces and kind of like these sort of like rules and how to behave, which I think is important because you have like you said like a lot of young people going out that maybe have never been to a nightclub before that just need to learn the dance floor etiquette. So I think emphasizing these things is pretty important.
Um, yeah, I think that, well, you were saying like there's so many new people on the dance floor, people who just turned 21, people who kind of took for granted like nightlife spaces and never really went out. And so like during the reopening or the end of the lockdown, like 2021, we saw so many people interacting with our spaces, our like nightlife spaces. I think also we're so far away from the root of the culture, like the loft, the garage. A lot of these parties that we're super influenced by are just not part of the mainstream like dance music culture anymore. So people will whip out their phone, put their flash on, take a video, and like not think anything of it, right? Because they don't know that like that's not really how you interact with the space. Or people will like kind of come up and like invade your personal space because they don't know that like, okay, I feel like that's what you do in a club. Like a lot of people just don't really understand the just like the culture around like being or navigating a nightlife space. And I don't totally blame them, like some people, you could tell when it's like they're just kind of being shitty.
Yeah.
And goes without saying that's wrong and there's no place for that. But then there's just like a lot of these young kids who like don't know that you're not supposed to make a request or interrupt a DJ, or they don't know that you're not supposed to like whip your phone out on the dance floor. Like there's a lot of things that I think like as just like in the city, and a lot of like our club spaces, like our party spaces, just us as like, people on the dance floor could do a better job about like, just like keeping up with these practices. Kind of like us educating like the people who we bring into the spaces, kind of similarly to like if we're bringing people to the loft, just on how to engage with the space and like navigate the space. And I think that like, I don't know, like years from now, we could kind of get back to what it is that has kind of been like a little bit lost in terms of like the intentionality and like the way that we interact with a lot of these spaces.
I understand what you're saying, and you answered already part of the question that I would have as a follow-up question, in a sense of how do you, let me go back a little bit. You said these are a lot of young kids that don't know how to interact in a nightlife space or in a party space, let's put it that way, and they are not taught how to party, if I can say it that way. With that, I go back to like how I learned, like the elders, they, obviously I'm from nature, I'm more of an observant, and I watch first before I jump into things. So I kind of have that, but the elders showed me and took me basically like, oh, we have to go to this party, we have to go to that party, and just then dragged me along basically, and that's how I learned all the spaces and learned all the DJs and learned how to dance, with the people. Now, going back to what you just said, if you don't have that person or if you don't have that bigger community of accepting you or just, inviting you into the space, how do you think a young person, yeah, I keep saying young, you guys are young too, I'm not old either, but like somebody who really has no connection to that, how do you think they can find that? And also within that, I'm also interested in how you guys found it. You guys mentioned in the interview Blog House. First of all, I have no clue what that is.
I'm so glad that you don't. I'm so glad you don't know.
But like, how did you find your way into the good into the good part of electronic music? Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
And then with your experience, what would you advise somebody who who has no clue, but then also hears this podcast and be like, I want to go.
Yeah. There's this clip of DVS1. I don't know if y'all saw it, like circulating.
Yeah.
And he's talking about like some of the entry points of like music, that we have to kind of like go through to get to like the root, like the really good stuff. And I think that's the same for everybody. Like for us, it was like more of like the electronic, like blog house stuff, which again, no disrespect to that. I still listen to it sometimes,
But what is it?
It's like a lot of Euro inspired dance music that is kind of like very electronic. The sounds are definitely more synthetic than they are organic. I'm trying to think of some artists like early Diplo, before Major Lazer, early Daft Punk, kind of Justice.
I
Like
see.
a lot of like Euro, Paris, Los Angeles, Steve Aoki. I'm trying to think of who were like the bigger.
Yeah, I mean those are the big
Okay,
ones.
well,
Yeah.
that at least it
If
rings
that
a
paints
bell
a
for me.
picture,
Yeah, no.
But yeah, I think that was our entry point. A lot of the kids today, their entry point is like this kind of like gabber, 170 BPM, like rave, whatever. Again, no disrespect to that. But we all kind of find different ways to get to like the music that we feel really inspired by, or the music that feels super, I don't know. I don't even know, because it's like, who am I to say what is like the origins or like the original, or you know what I'm saying? Like if that's even better than like the stuff that people are like
You like what you
listening to
like.
now.
You
Yeah.
can't make the rules for the other people. I agree. I'm just wondering because I'm a little bit further removed, and you said it yourself. Like there's a disconnect between like you say, if I remember correctly, you said there's a bigger disconnect of like you're far removed from the roots of the culture. So I'm trying to make a connection and like maybe even think of to reinforce a more intergenerational, not just with the music but also with dance. I come from a dance background before I started DJing, so I have that example also where some of the elders or the OGs, they did their thing here when they were younger, and then they got asked to teach around the world, but they never really taught here for a long time. So there's a whole generation lost. And I use lost. It sounds, terrible, but of course there's always one or two. But just now, when you see decades later, you're like, okay, but where are the people that are right after you? So that's why I'm just trying to find ways to bring more people onto the dance floor, to the good music, if that makes sense.
I think one thing about the like younger generation, the people who are just starting that come to clubs now, like they maybe don't know a lot about like this kind of stuff that we're doing, that we're inspired by. Not to sound redundant, but like the roots of the music that we all play and listen to and are inspired by. And so I feel like even if they're into something else, like why not include them in our spaces? Why not welcome them? Why not continue to like teach, as like our teachers, mentors, etc., whatever you want to call them, have taught us. There's so many different like entry points, and I think that the difficult thing for us, the thing that I feel like one of the things that I get annoyed about, because a lot of the stuff is like, whatever, find your thing, whatever your niche is just the mislabeling and kind of like, I don't know, there's so much music that I hear that people are like, this is techno, or like this is house music, or and it's just not, and I think that's where a lot of people get confused and how they kind of get led astray or maybe led farther away from like the root of the thing.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So that leads me to something else where I don't really think it's I don't know, but do you think that there's a need of more people who know what they're talking about in places like and I'm just naming names, Track Source or Resident Advisor, or like the non DJ world, like the I guess it's the media. I don't know.
journalism.
But just me, like when I look at whatever, if I go to Track Source and it's like, oh, what's out? I haven't been looking for a minute, and I pick what a genre that I would play or like a subgenre, even though I don't really necessarily believe in that. But of course, you look through that, and then I listen to it, and I'm like, based on what you just said, this is not really what I would consider that. Do you think there could be more done in that area or in other areas that, like, I guess behind the scenes, behind the not behind the DJ booth, but behind in I guess in places where you put the word out for music that is not like actively in the DJ booth or on the dance floor.
For sure.
Yeah, I mean, I think some of that's being done. I feel like RA has had some interviews
True, yeah.
where they have kind of shine light on maybe the origin of things. Barbie and Paul from Love Injection, I think, are doing that right now with their magazine. And yeah, they've just like been documenting, the scene for the past 10 plus years, and also just interviewing a lot of these legends that don't, really get the spotlight that they deserve. but yeah, for sure. I think there's more that can be done in like music journalism to educate. I think also maybe a lot of it comes down to just what people want. It is the music that we all love is still such a niche thing. Um, and so I don't know if it's also because, like tech house is a bigger sound and makes more money. There's gonna be more coverage there on that,
Mm-hmm.
you know. But yeah, I think publications like Love Injection, for example, is like a great start for just getting the word out and kind of exposing people to the culture.
Mm.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like there's no shortage of like info on the new Fred again, whatever. Or, like there's no I don't know, how do I phrase this? I think that I mean, I don't know that you feel that I'm curious to hear how you feel. I've never really expected a lot of like the mainstream, outlets to kind of push forward the underground, you know? And I'm not even speaking to like Resident Advisor. I think more of like, I don't know, you could even think of like Pitchfork or like
Mm-hmm.
Rolling Stone or like, there's people in all of these, all these platforms who are like looking towards the underground, but mainly it's not that. And I think that's where, um, people like Barbie and Paul who do Love Injection kind of come in. Just like I feel like what I see that I'm more interested in, even like this podcast, like people who are part of the scene, who are part of the underground, who do their research and know what they're talking about, um, who are able to like tell the stories, and who are able to like share like the information and share the culture. I don't think that like, I mean, speaking for myself, I'm not looking to like a lot of these bigger outlets to see like what's going on or what's popping.
True. Yeah.
Yeah.
Neither do I.
Mm.
And if they do, then I'm always surprised, and in a
Yeah.
positive way.
Yeah. Thankful for sure. Yeah.
Thing was like, oh, there's somebody who kind of like was interested in something,
Yeah.
and that's cool. Um, the only thing, again, I think I personally have with those big outlets, if they do cover something, again, with the mislabeling, like, oh, house music and techno, and then I'm like, this is just not it. But again,
Yeah.
I think, and I always hope that the people who are really interested, they find a way to then dig deeper,
Mm.
to hopefully find
Yeah.
the
Where it comes
so-called
from.
underground,
Right. For sure.
even though it's niche, but it's still at the same time it's big, and it feels like there are certain industry rules that then apply to the underground, maybe if it's not as severe or as big as the big music industry, like major industry,
Yeah.
if
Yeah.
that makes
Yeah.
sense.
I mean, you saw Andre 3000's album that just got like on, I think it was like Pitchfork, where they like labeled it as like rap album or something.
For real?
Yeah.
On
Was it
purpose?
Pitchfork?
I
I
don't know.
didn't read any reviews other than the memes online
Yeah.
Instagram.
I'm pretty sure it was. And have you heard it yet?
I, not the whole thing, but
Yeah. But
I
like
listened to
beautiful
some.
album,
It's
but like
beautiful,
no
yeah.
rap or whatever. And I think about like um some of the up and coming or maybe like veteran ambient artists who are super geeked to be like, okay, we're like, our stuff is finally, becoming like above ground a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
We're being put on the map. Andre 2000 just made like a really dope, like really beautiful ambient experimental album.
Mm-hmm.
And then you go on Pitchfork and it says hip hop, and you're like, shit, like that's kind of like I don't know, it feels kind of like a blow
Absolutely.
a little bit, not even taking into account like the race factor or whatever.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Just the fact that like, a lot of, like Brendan said, a lot of the underground like dance music that a lot of us are making is super niche. And we, you get conflicted when people like Drake or Beyonce try to do like dance music stuff, but it also like does put eyes on like some of the underground stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think that's the way that we speak about music and these artists is kind of yeah, we just kind of have to be careful about how we're doing it and like what we're labeling it.
How do you guys label yourself, if you have to? Because if people ask you,
I mean, I always
do you just say a different answer every time, or
I
do you just have a certain spiel at this point? Or you
I
just
kind of uh rattle off like a bunch of hashtags, I feel.
okay?
And Brandon's like, yeah, it's house music, you know.
In terms of genre, you mean, or
Yeah,
Yeah.
like
yeah,
if when people see like, oh, you have the New York sound, and or I don't know if people ask for a press
yeah,
thing for some of your productions, you always have to label it for them to
Yeah.
sell it
right,
in a way. Um,
I feel like the New York sound, we're all feel like we're all descendants of the loft, right?
mhm.
Directly or indirectly. And at the loft you'd hear and you still hear everything from like house to techno to rock and roll to R&B to soul to
Right.
and I feel like that's like a perfect like way of describing like the music that we make um when it comes to like this New York sound, but I don't know if a lot of people are taking that away when they hear that.
Okay.
Like New York sound to some people could just be like vocal house or like you know what I'm saying, or like hip hop
Yeah.
or but yeah, it's also kind of like a sensitive topic because like it's hard to make music and you think it's one thing and then somebody else thinks it's like another thing. So I don't know. What do you think?
in terms of labels, yeah, I don't know. I sometimes will say soulful house music just to give them an idea and not be like extremely vague about it. Because I think that is still kind of like our foundation in a way, even though we do play different things. But yeah, it is a bit kind of annoying sometimes to have to like put yourself into a box and give people this one thing to identify you as,
Is that at this point now when we can go into talking about you guys' production, um, not just your previous production, but at this point, do you guys have this? I don't want to call it pressure, but maybe a thought that pops into your head while you're working on a project. That's like, okay, this is even number one. Okay, this is what I want to make right now, or this is what we want to make right now. And then, is there a point during that process where I was like, are they gonna fuck with that, or are they? Is it gonna fit into any type of those hashtags or genres that you
I
just
see.
mentioned?
Yeah.
Is that at this point in your journey, is that a thing or an issue, or that happens
Yeah. Yeah, like every
every time?
song, every track. Um in a in a way, yes, every time we sit down and like make something. Um but also we don't make music for the club, you know? We don't make it for any specific purpose. Even when it's like a remix or something and like maybe you will be like, okay, they'll probably want something more like, with a 4/4.
Yeah.
So if we're feeling like inspired by something else, then we'll do like a 4/4 version. But otherwise, we just kind of like make the music that we make, that we do what we can in terms of like, this is all I know. So like, this is what I'm going to do. And I can't really like do anything different regardless of like what the landscape of dance music is or what like the trends are or like what we think people are expecting from us. Or it's kind of just like, this is what I made when I sat down today. And yeah, it's always like kind of scary to think like, okay, what if people don't like this? But we also know that like people won't like it. Like there's not everybody's gonna like it. Maybe one person will like it. Maybe everybody will like it. But you kind of don't really want everybody to like it either, too. You know, which is like more of like an imposter syndrome thing. Like, because then do they like it? But yeah, I think that just accepting the fact that like the music that we make is just so part of like our lived experience and like who we are makes it feel better because like it's not even in my control. It's just like what it is.
I'm sorry if you
Yeah,
want to
no,
answer separately.
yeah, I agree. I think congruence, really, just like not trying to like do things to like fit in or do it to get more gigs, for example, or do it to like for any other reason purely than just like wanting to like make cool stuff.
Okay. I can thank you for putting that, giving me a segue into a question of, did you guys start producing and DJing at the same time, or well, actually, it's two separate questions, right?
Yeah.
So, did you guys start DJing together as a team, or were you guys individually already playing, whether that was at home or somewhere else? And then also, as far as if you production came later, how far, if I can even ask that question, like, how is you guys produce or work together all the time? Okay, let me ask this differently. When I
Yeah.
let me go back. When I see you guys play, it's like you, or at least what I've seen so far, is always back to back, right? And if I watch you, it's like it doesn't seem like you guys communicate verbally, right? You just everybody plays their thing one on one, and it just works smoothly. There's no, maybe it's just you really connect musically on such like really this on the same level that you guys don't have to talk about, oh, let's go this way or go that way, or other conversations before you guys start playing before the set. Like, how do you guys approach, not how do you guys approach, but what is like the process? Has it always been the same, or has it developed over time as far as DJing? But then obviously then we can talk about production
Sure.
separately.
Yeah, I think it's mostly always been the same.
Yeah.
Mostly maybe like aside from like our first DJ gig. But the communication is like, do you have a track you want to start with, or do I have a track I want to start with? And then we'll just kinda
Just
go from
take
there.
it from there.
Yeah.
Or like I'm gonna play 2 tracks instead of 1 because we usually just go back to back, 1 for 1. But that's kind of the only thing that we're discussing while we're playing, or like laughing about something on the dance floor, or like But yeah, it's very minimal communication. I feel like we kind of share the same brain when we're behind the booth, so it makes it very simple.
Yeah, and it's really hard to kind of prepare for, as you know, like parties, just because like you could maybe in your head find the song you really want to play, and it's maybe more high energy, and you're thinking like, okay, I'm going on at 12 o'clock, I'm gonna play it at this moment, but it may not be that moment, you know. Or you go in expecting, like, for example, I think this nowadays party is a good example. At 3 p.m., I was expecting it to be pretty tame, pretty chill, and it wasn't like that at all. So yeah, I think it's hard to like really prepare for things, you know. So I think the best way to for us to go about it is just to kind of like let everything be spontaneous.
That's dope. And then going back to the production, did you started that at what point in your DJ journey did you guys start getting into production, or what I guess triggered the thought of like, I kind of want to make my own tracks, or like let's do our own tracks in
Yeah.
a sense.
Well, we're 30 now. I started producing at 14, you know, and it was
okay.
always like more of a like interest in DJing. And it's always just been like playing with this, playing with that, you know, like kind of how everybody starts producing, just like making loops, and then kind of like progressing into like songs. But I think like a mixture of like imposter syndrome and just finding the right time made it so that our first song we put out was like 3 years ago. I think,
Is that
like,
the one with Brandon?
Yeah.
Brandon Markle
Markell.
Holmes. Yeah. That was in like 2020. And yeah, I don't think it really has anything to do with our DJ journey per se. Like we weren't like making songs to play in the club, or making songs to get booked in clubs. And I commend a lot of the DJs who are like, I'm not going to produce, like, I'm a DJ, like, I don't need to produce, because I feel like a lot of DJs will, like, make a record just to get booked more. And those records aren't always, like, the most intentional records. But yeah, it took us some time to feel like we wanted to put our voice out there in like that sense, like the production sense. So,
Okay.
yeah.
And
Yeah.
is that also? No, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was gonna say, and I think us like doing the parties and DJing years before that was good because it gave us the platform so that when we did release stuff, we already had people kind of curious and had a bit of an audience.
Yeah, that makes sense. And then as far as the process goes, is that the same, like non-verbal, like completely on one thing, it's like, or do you work at home? You work at home and then you guys come together, or you guys just do everything together?
It depends, but for the most part, it's just like working at home, and then we'll be like, oh, okay, what do you think about this? Like, Brandon may be like, okay, maybe you should add like hi-hats here, or like maybe you should do like a synth solo here, So yeah, it's definitely more of a dialogue, but I don't know, it does also feel quite seamless. Yeah, what do you feel about that? Like, I feel like the process for our production, just like making songs, and we both have different experiences, of course, but I feel like the collaborative part is very seamless, even though like the production part, it could be like pulling my hair out or like figuring out like how to, I don't know, like make a bass line. But
Yeah, I think musically we just kind of like the same things musically. I think even when it comes to production, so yeah, I don't think there's ever been something where we're like, no, we're not putting this out, or like something that he's been excited about, or something that I like that, or I feel like we've never really had like a disagreement on like, oh, this is not, we shouldn't put this out, or I'm not crazy about this. Yeah.
We'll say that, but we'll both think it's bad. like, oh, yeah, I don't like this either.
There's okay, so I just remember recently I went into a Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis deep hole,
Oh, nice.
and he said obviously they're dual, right? But there's a lot of projects that it's only Jimmy Jam on the project, and then there's another project where it's actually only Terry on there. But no matter what, it's always both of them as credits because that's their partnership. Is there for you guys sometimes it's like it says musclecars, but this is actually 95% Craig, or the other one that's actually the other way around?
That's the same. Like, we're just one person.
It's just one person.
Yeah,
That's
so
cool.
It's like regardless of like who did what, it's still muscle cars. I think the only way that
Same.
it wouldn't be that is like a different project, different sound, something that just doesn't make sense for like
For
our
a
like,
muscle cars project.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. I have a few tracks that I track names that I'm just curious how they came about, or like the name, whatever.
Yeah.
First one I have on my list is Cherry Curl Jam.
Yes,
So
love it.
yeah, the in the beginning it reminds me of Marvin Gaye, or, that track which I can't think of the name. But
I know what you're
they're
talking about.
about.
Yes, absolutely.
How did the track and the name come together, or the idea of it?
So funny you say that because I completely forgot about that song.
That's for the lot.
For the Lot Radio compilation, yeah. That was the Lot asked us to do a compilation for their 6-year anniversary.
Think so.
I think. And we didn't have much of anything. Like, I think like, and I commend the artists who do this, who make a track every day, and they have like, I'm like, oh, I'm sitting on like 500 tracks. All of the music that we make is accounted for, or all the music we have made is accounted for, and so whenever somebody asks us for music, I'm like, do I really want to give them this thing that I like plan to put out in 2027 or like this, whatever. So we'll like make something new. And I think that track, we did that, and it was kind of, it was watching, I don't know if you've seen the Friday series, this dude Pinky, who has like a jerry curl, and he's like always like bouncing around and like spraying his hair and stuff. And I feel like that's what reminded me, like that's where I thought of it. There's this like party scene, and I was like, okay, this kind of, you hear like a bunch of people like screaming and like, partying, and like that kind of reminds me of that energy. But yeah, I also completely forgot about that
So
song.
just out of curiosity, the people in the beginning that are talking, and then, like, is this sampled, or is this like friends of yours just like, is it a live recording of something?
No, those are like multiple different
Okay.
samples.
Okay,
Yeah,
okay.
like multiple different like crowd field recording like samples.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Cool. The other one that I have is Francis' theme, where number one is Francis. Who's Francis?
Francis is a special individual.
Okay.
Human, lovely human.
Is that the person who's talking in the beginning, or is that
Yes.
you?
Yeah,
No,
yeah.
that's Francis.
Yeah,
Okay. So what is the idea of the track, or the background of this track?
It's just like an aggressive theme, like aggressive tune. Feel like we don't do we haven't up until that point hadn't like put out anything that was really like harder. A lot of this stuff was like more like melodic and soulful.
True, yeah.
And it's funny, we actually reinterpreted or like remade that track for like an upcoming project, and did end up making it like a little bit more melodic, and a little bit more soulful. But yeah, just like wanted to make like a really like aggressive like track. But yeah, what do you?
Yeah, no, that's it. Yeah, that was our first like club banger, I would say.
Yeah.
Yeah. Dope. And then the third one that I have is actually a remix you did, the Brooklyn Ballers remix.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Because right, because it says the Stye needs me mix or
Yes.
whatever it's called.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
what are both of you from Bed-Stuy, or
No,
none of you?
My dad.
Your
raises
dad.
me
Okay.
outside, yeah.
Okay. So is there like what does the name mean of the, obviously Brooklyn Ballers? I guess there's a
Yeah.
reference to Brooklyn, and then
It was like a track by this artist Jidam, and asked us to like remix it. Speaking about Brooklyn, just like things that happen in Brooklyn, etc. And yeah, like listening to it, there's like a lyric, like that happens a couple times.
Yeah.
And I think it says like Chinese food or something.
I gotta
But it
listen
sounds
again
like
now.
yeah, but it sounds like the Stye
Yeah.
needs me. And I'm
Okay.
like, yes, absolutely that. But like on a deeper level, I'm just like, I do feel that way. Like I feel the same about like just New York City as a whole, and like being so dedicated to where I'm from. So yeah, it's like on a deeper level. That's what.
Yeah.
Oh, that's cool. You just mentioned very briefly about a remake of a song that is coming up eventually, or coming out eventually. Is there projects that you can speak of already that are on the way, or that you guys are working on maybe for next year, which is actually very soon, next year?
Yeah, that's right.
It's next year, basically.
Already December.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you can already talk about, if you want to.
Yeah.
Either way, it's up to
Don't
you.
look at me, Brandon. I'll let Brandon.
Yeah, it's we have our album coming out next year.
Oh, okay.
Which we're excited for the world to hear.
Nice.
Which hopefully will be in the second quarter of next year.
Nice.
Yeah, we have some great remixes too. Yeah, and I think that's all we'll say about that. So just stay tuned, and yeah, can't wait for everyone to hear it.
That's dope. I'm sure everybody's excited already to hear new stuff from you guys. Um,
And we've been playing some of the stuff at parties too. So if you catch us,
Yeah.
oh, but
you-
how
if
would
you-
we know that
Yeah,
it's
that's
yours?
the track that doesn't come up on
greatest
Shazam maybe or something, I don't know.
Yeah, it's been really nice when people, because I feel like every time we've played it, somebody's been like, "What is
Yeah.
this song?"
Oh, so you guys
Um,
are taking notes on reactions and
Kind of, yeah. I mean, the
Serving
song
the
is done already,
songs.
so like if they don't like it, it's still coming out. But yeah, no, it's definitely, just going back to like that production process of just like how scary it is to like put anything into the world, especially stuff that you're writing, like in terms of like lyrics too. Yeah, you never know what people are gonna think about it, so it's always just like really really sweet when people have like nice things to say about it. So, yeah.
Sure. I asked this question already. I actually only have two main things that I wanna, which is my usual actually. um, the I asked every guest on the podcast to give me 3 tracks. So you guys can either split it up or give me 3 each. I don't care, or 2 each, for however you guys. But basically, it's tracks, and also not genre specific.
Yeah.
That you connect with dance. That make you dance, that make other people dance, that you remember somebody dancing, just any in that nature. I know it's really broad,
Yeah.
but there's usually things that pop up in your head.
The first song that popped up is this song called C'est pour nous. It's like a track by the Magma offshoot called Offering. And it's just like a really long, like, feels like opera in the beginning and then like jazz towards the like middle and end.
Wow.
Just completely like beatless. But every time I hear it, I'm like, I can't sit still to it. And it's my favorite thing about it, which I am always inspired by, is that it's not for the dance floor. I think things that are able to invoke those reactions without using like a kick drum or like these like traditional like dance music sounds. I'm always like really excited about that kind of stuff. So
For me, one that just came to mind was Lil Louis' Never Ending Love Song, which came out on his Two Sides to Every Story album. I saw our late mentor Carlos Sanchez played at Good Room, the first time I ever saw him play. And it's such a very like pretty chill song. It doesn't really like tell you to dance or make you dance necessarily just by listening to it, but I think he just played it like at the right time, and it was definitely a moment. And also just this idea of like Craig said, playing things that maybe aren't telling you to dance directly, but are just kind of evoking that.
Right.
But yeah, that's one that comes to mind. Never Ending Love Song by Lil Louis. You have a third?
this is like, I feel like everybody knows this one, but Burnin' Hot by Pevin Everett. Feel like the remix.
Listen, I've never seen a dance floor empty when you play a Pevin
Yeah.
song.
Everyone's running.
I literally run to the dance floor every time I hear like that bass line coming in, and I've just been like starting to play it a little bit more lately, like after having not really played it. I'm just like, this is such a fun, like freeing record. Yeah, and I love that. I love that song so much. It's definitely that one. Yeah.
For sure. Do you have another one that you want to mention, or are we gonna keep it at 3? No pressure.
No, he definitely has another one.
Let me think.
If not, I can talk about Pevin all day long.
Exactly.
I mean, yeah, there's just so many. One I love a lot is Brand New Day by Louis Vega.
That's another one of those.
Which is one of those like classics. I even heard like I know in South Africa, I think in other parts of Africa as well, it's a really big record out there. but yeah, just like a very just beautiful song about the birth of his son Nico, and him making it in that like kind of in that like fresh mindset of having a new child and creating this like such a beautiful piece of music. Yeah, it's one of my favorites.
I feel like really anything by Louis.
Yeah.
It's like
Yeah, like
to
if
be-
it's that, yeah, if we talk about New York sound, I
Oh,
think
yeah.
he should be,
Yeah.
his
Yeah,
picture should be
exactly.
right there.
Absolutely.
for real.
And then my last question per se is not necessarily a question, but it's more so, is there anything that you would like to share with the listeners, with me, with each other, that I might have not asked you, or that you don't get asked often and that's on your mind and like, I need to talk about this? Or just, something that we spoke about earlier, but not enough. Any advice, any thoughts, any, I don't know.
Gosh, I'm like, I feel like, or should we even be giving
It's not, and quite honestly, it's not like advice. Okay, so
Yeah,
this
of
is
course.
what you do, more
No.
so maybe even to yourself. I was like, okay, you said you're 30, you started, what, 16 years ago to
Yeah.
start DJing? Something that, I wish I would have known that back then.
Maybe
Yeah.
I think maybe advice, but also just thinking about our path. Like it just takes time. I think going back to like the generation that's younger than us, I think people see a lot of like clips on social media of DJs playing internationally or playing these festivals and things like that. And I think there's this like eagerness to like want to just do everything, within like a year or two of DJing. And I think it's just important to understand that it takes time. But I think also should go back to the question of like, why are you doing this? I think that's
Exactly.
something that people should also be asking themselves. For us, I think it's amazing and very grateful that we get to like travel and play for sure. But we don't play to travel, right? We play because we love to share music with people. And so, yeah, I think for people that maybe are a bit eager, feel like stressed out about, maybe not doing everything, just it just takes time. And I think, we also are in a generation where like a lot more opportunities are possible compared to like, back in the 90s when there wasn't social media, right? And kind of had to get discovered through like production or just being a really big DJ. So I think for anyone that feels discouraged, maybe just know that everyone has their own path and these things take time.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of DJs who we are really inspired by, some of our mentors, like, don't really even hit their stride until they're like in their 50s or like having these big moments, like, and we think about that a lot too, like as 30, like we're both 30, think about that a lot, like, oh yeah, we're not really not trying to blow up in general, but whatever like acknowledgement success we have coming, we're like not in a rush to see it. You just like kind of keep doing the thing and like see what happens, see what comes of it. So
Keep doing the thing.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Well, that's it from my side. Thank you so much for
Thank you so
being
much for
here, for
having
taking
us.
the time. For anybody who's checking the video, I'm here, obviously, but as you can have been watching, the space that I usually record the podcast in is not accessible at the moment. Let's put it that way. Unfortunately, and that's why we had to find a plan B. That's why we're in this little professional recording studio, but it's just, professional does not mean homey at the same time.
Right,
Let's put it that way. Which I'm going to make it official. We're going to find a way to bring muscle cars to our space in Queens and either do another interview or just rock out. Whatever, we'll find a way. Thank you everybody for listening. Check out the podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcast, or YouTube. Share it, listen to it, and comment and do all the things. Thank you again. Goodbye.
Thank you all.